fellow councillors, staff and residents viewing via live stream. Good morning all and welcome. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land on which we stand, the Gulnay people. I wish to acknowledge my respect for their current and emerging elders and those in dreaming. I thank them for the contributions they have made in building this community. Do we have any apologies other than Mr. Goodman, who's an apology? None other? Okay. Recently, a long-serving local government councillor, Councillor Les Shue, who served 19 years with the Johnson Shire Council. Les was a life member and patron of many sporting clubs, and he made a huge contribution to our community. So if you would you please stand and we'll acknowledge 1 minute silence. Thank you. We'll go to conflicts of interest. Declaration of prescribed conflicts of interest or declarable conflict of interest. Please use this opportunity to make public any prescribed conflict of interest or declarable conflict of interest in respect of the items in the agenda. Councillors should use the opportunity to disclose and/or comment on other councillors and/or staff interests in accordance with the Act and the regulations. Do we have any conflicts to declare? Mr. CEO.
Look, whilst not a decision maker in item 8.1, it does relate to an application for legal assistance for myself in my role as Chief Executive Officer. So I'll leave the room during that to allow Council to consider the matter.
Thank you, Mr. Graffin. No further conflicts to declare. We'll move on to confirmation of the minutes. Would somebody move that the previous minutes were a true and accurate record, please? Moved by Councillor Pervin, seconded by Councillor Barnes. Thank you. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Any business arising from those minutes? Councillor Millwood.
Good morning, and through the chair, I do have quite a list here, so just bear with me. There's nothing too in depth. At item 4.1, normalisation of Port Hinchinbrook. Do we have confirmation on all the funding from the state and federal government? And have we any indication of the additional 1.9 which was requested with the funding?
I'll refer to the CEO.
Through the Chair, thanks for the question, Councillor. Council has received a final draft of the state funding agreement. So that funding agreement is back with the state to make some final amendments following a meeting this week, and we'd hope to have that back with Council for execution next week. So that's the $6.3 million from the state. We've had correspondence this week again with the federal government in relation to the funding for the dredging of 1 Mile Creek, that emergency dredging funding of 1.5. So we hope to have that draft agreement in the next week or so to start doing a review and some final negotiations. And we have followed up with the federal government also on the draft agreement for the $6 million. So we haven't seen the draft yet, but we are working with the federal government to receive that.
Okay, so as you just quoted then in the recommendation, there's a statement about emergency dredging of 1 Mile Creek. Can you please explain what that actually means by emergency dredging?
Emergency dredging is really focusing on making that 1 Mile Creek navigable again. So it's not a maintenance dredging agreement. It's not funding for ongoing maintenance of that channel. It's to open up that channel and make it navigable again.
Okay, and at item 9.1, there was a petition for a walking track to alligators. In relation to the petition for the walking track, has Council proceeded with an application for the relative funding through the Walking Local Government Grants Program?
I'll have to take that question on notice, and I'll provide an administrative response. I'm not aware, and I don't believe the officer's here today to answer that.
Okay. Item 10.3, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you, Mr. Graffin, for seeing to the removal of the car on Jack Drive, which I have banged on about since the day I got here, and I thank you and the people who were responsible for that. That was great. Item 10.15, the wayfinding signs being repaired. Do we have any line of sight to that?
There's a contractual issue with the wayfinding signs at the moment, so the project manager for that project has been in contact with the contractors, and those signs are currently still in their defects liability period. So the repairs are a requirement for those contractors to undertake, and we are waiting for a response from the contractors. But there has been significant correspondence backwards and forwards in relation to particularly getting the lights and the Innisfail signs working, and our delivery team in our asset maintenance is looking at ongoing maintenance program for those signs once we're out of that defects liability period.
No problem. And the last one is item 10.18. Is there a new contract to be sought for the after hours number?
Yes, Council is considering an item today that puts a focus back into that community area. We have been under-resourced in that area for some time, but there will be a direct focus to go to tender and to have a contract in place for that after-hours line.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Millwood. Any further business arising? If not, we'll move on to item 3, receipt of minutes, 3.1, page 32. And Mr. Singh was going to present this report.
Through the Chair, I'll be
Mr.
presenting that
CEO
report
will
today.
Okay.
Item 3.1 is just presenting the minutes from the Cassowary Coast Regional Council Audit Committee meeting. So the Audit Committee meets quarterly each financial year to review matters relating to the operational risks and control measures detailed in its internal audit plan as required by the Local Government Regulations 2012. So the minutes of the meeting contain a summary of matters which were discussed and are provided for Council's information. So the minutes are attached to the item, and there's a recommendation there that the unconfirmed minutes, which include relevant matters discussed at the Cassowary Coast Regional Council Audit Committee meeting held on Thursday, the 2nd of December 21, be noted.
Thank you, Mr. Graffin. Any questions for the officer? So moved by Councillor Bain, seconded by Councillor Toohey. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. We move on to item 4, governance, environment and finance. Item 4.1, page 39, finance report. And Mr. Smith was going to present this report.
Coming.
No, nobody here.
Yeah, he's coming, I think. Miss Coppin. Miss Coppin will present this report.
Miss Coppin.
Morning, Mr. Mayor.
Good. You're up for your report, mate. Is it Miss Coppin? Bradley, sorry. That's her maiden name.
It certainly is.
Isn't it?
Good morning, Mayor and Councillors. Today I'm presenting the finance report for the 31st of December. The following are some key highlights. Our operational revenue is $47.4 million, which is currently over budget in comparison to a budget of $46.8 million. Our operational expenditure is $47.4, which is $1.3 million under budget in comparison to our $48.7. The end of month cash balance is $42 million. Our capital expenditure for the month was $5.2 million, and the year-to-date capital expenditure, including commitments, totals $26.8 million. Some key points to note in reference to the budget variance is our interest is under budget, predominantly relating to interest investments, and some under budget rates interest. Operating grants is over budget due to the receipt of DFRA emergent works funding from the 2021 events, offset by grants under budget due to fire risk project and the Cardwell mountain bike project not yet commenced. Other revenue sources are over budget, mainly due to cost recovery rates, collection expense, and internal revenue under budget due to the delivery of late delivery of our new waste plant. Employee expenses are under budget due to vacant positions, which is offset by our increased contract labour. Materials and services are under budget due to our reduced fleet expenditure, insurance savings, reduced marketing expenditure, and reduced contract expenditure. Depreciation is currently tracking under budget due to the minimal capitalisation. Council officers are currently working diligently on this process to get these capitalisations up and running. Internal expenditure is under budget due to the delay of our delivery of our new waste plant. And capital grants are under budget due to the DFRA grant for Upper Darragee Road, not yet received. This is offset by our claims for Kelly Beach Road culverts and Barbwire Creek Bridge, with budgets to be rephased in the December review. Any questions?
Thank you. Any questions for the officer? If not, would somebody move the recommendation, please? Moved by Councillor McLeod, seconded by Councillor Baines. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We move on to item 4.2, page 53, organisational structure, community customer experience, and Mr Graffin will present this report.
Thank you. Through the Chair, Council first identified customer service as a key focus in 2016 and included a goal of community first in its corporate plan 2017 to 22, and this theme has continued in Council's strategic plan 21-25 as goal number 1, community our people. Council's been on this journey of improved customer experience and satisfaction since 2016 and acknowledged customer experience is a whole of organisation focus and not a department within an organisation. To date, levels of customer satisfaction have not changed materially. Therefore, this report proposes to amend the organisational structure to have the Manager of Customer Experience and Department report directly to the Chief Executive Officer. The role will have a functional relationship with all other delivery departments. However, delivery departments will retain responsibility for the outcomes in their service. In background, Council are required by resolution to adopt an organisational structure, and that organisational structure is a hierarchy by which Council's administration is divided into directorates, departments, and the different work areas, and provides effectively a chain of command. This change is really a focus on providing that customer first focus. This is about us looking at our customer satisfaction and the fact that that to date we haven't seen that material change, and this focus is about providing that broader focus across our organisation and putting our customers first. We have the technology now that's been implemented through the Customer First project in Tech One that manages over 12,000 annual customer requests. But improving that and supporting that technology was only one component, and this solution to excellent customer service depends on as much as supporting technology as it does with following the right processes and acting out the most appropriate behaviours. And the organisation has not yet addressed how to transform this process and behaviours to deliver that excellent customer service. This proposed adjustment has been looked at, and consultation has been undertaken both with the unions and with the affected employees. But it's important to say that this organisational restructure is around reporting lines and around changing the perception of a customer experience role. It's not around looking at organisational savings. It's not around redundancies. There are no changes in those spaces due to this proposal. The proposal does result in some other minor amendments, and those amendments will see the communications team move and report to the customer experience manager and not the government's lead, and that's a more classical approach where the team that are communicating and improving our customer experience also have that arm, which is our comms arm, that's actually putting out our communications externally and internally within the organisation, working as one team. We'll also seek to have the information and records team, so our records team move and sit under our governance lead and not the Manager of Information Services. So again, having our governance through our RTIs and our records team working together, hopefully we are getting information back to the community in a more streamlined fashion. We also looked at the library team, which had previously sat underneath the Customer Experience Manager, and looking to move that team to report underneath the Manager of Community Relations and Services. So the library team, whilst providing excellent customer experience, they are a community service and one where those synergies between our library team and our Manager of Community Relations and Services are much stronger. The final change that's proposed is around our Housing and Community Centres Coordinator reporting to our Facilities Asset Manager, not the Manager of Community Relations and Services, and that's around the volume and quantum of properties that we have in that area and the requirement for proper and best asset management practices in those properties. So working with our Facility Asset Manager looking at asset management for those properties, and also providing greater support for capital renewal and capital works on those properties as well, whilst that coordinator still providing that focus on the individuals and the families that are provided accommodation through that scheme. There is a recommendation there, and the recommendation is to note the adjustments of reporting lines as detailed within the report, and the report recommendation provides a new structure that's proposed for adoption by Council, which, as the report highlights, sees that customer experience area sit directly under the Chief Executive Officer, with the comms team sitting underneath that manager. That other change that can be seen in the proposed structure is for the records team to sit underneath the governance lead in that role. Just to highlight that customer experience manager, that's not becoming a part of the executive management team. It is a reporting line direct to the CEO to ensure that that service is a focus across our whole organisation. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you, Mr. Graffin. Clearly, this is an adjustment to the chain of command. There's no remuneration changes. And most importantly, from my experience, if we're going to improve customer service, we need the new people that you've highlighted in your report to look at the emergency number. That's the number one area of complaint. People are sick of getting on the phone, a broken water main, broken sewage, and they hear music for 30 minutes. I think that's the key outcome from the new officers and the new structure. Councillor Millwood.
Yeah, through the chair. So just confirming that all the staff involved have been consulted and are happy with the restructure and understand the changes in full?
Correct, yes. COVID has obviously meant that we've had to look outside the box with some of that consultation, so we've used mechanisms like face-to-face Teams meetings with the individuals that are impacted. We've recorded those meetings and that engagement with those staff. We've undertaken an impact statement which has looked at the impact, but as we said, there are no major impact on staff in the sense that they will be working from the same seat. They will be undertaking the same duties in the same team, but just those change of reporting lines which in our mind provide some better synergies for the organisation.
So when you say the same seat, you mean that they can work from their same location that they're currently at? Is that what that means?
They would still be working from their same location. I'll preface that with the fact that COVID at the moment, we do have a number of staff currently working from home or working in alternate areas to reduce our density.
Thank you, Councillor Millwood. Any further questions for the officer? Councillor Baines.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's more a reiteration piece for the general public. This is not about creating new positions. It's not about promotions. It's about streamlining the reporting roles and trying to get the teams working together more efficiently. Is that probably it in a nutshell?
That's
Mr.
absolutely
CEO?
it. Yep.
Yeah. Excellent.
Thank you, Councillor Baines.
Further to that, I would... Oh, sorry.
Councillor Toohey.
I just would like to, through the chair, support the recommendation. I think it's a great move. It's a much better flow than not that it wasn't bad before, but I think this will improve it. So I think it's a great move. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Toohey. Moved by Councillor Baines, seconded by Councillor Toohey. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. We move on to item 5, Asset Sustainability, 5.1, page 58, the water section, and this report will be presented by Mr. Page. Is this his first report? Does it count as an officer?
Might be.
Excuse me, Mr. Page, I think this is your first report in your new role, so welcome on board and hope you enjoy the journey with Cassowary Coast Regional Council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And good morning,
Morning.
councillors, Mr. CEO. I take it the report as read, so I'm just going to read through the executive summary of this report. So Council is a registered water service provider under the Water Safety and Reliability Act, and one of its legislative obligations is to provide an annual performance report on a number of indicators nominated by the Department of Regional Development, Manufacturing and Water, who are the regulator in this case. The data required by the regulator covers details such as connected populations, asset information, water treatment, sewage treatment, staff information within those areas, along with system performance, customer service and financial data. The water and sewage data required by the regulator was loaded into the statewide Water Information Management Portal, which is known as SWIM portal, to meet the 17th of December 2021 lodgement date. In addition to the lodgement of data into this portal, Council must also publicly publish its performance and commentary on key indicators. The Cassowary Coast Regional Council Water and Sewage Service Performance Report for 2020-21 satisfies Council's requirements under Section 142A of the Water Supply, Safety and Reliability Act to prepare a performance report on water and sewage services for the 2020-21 financial year. The report is structured to give an overview of the extent of Council's water and sewage schemes, followed by discussion on results of some of the key performance indicators for water services and sewage services lodged in the SWIM system. The data lodged in the SWIM system is included in the report. In addition to reporting against SWIM data, the performance report also includes an overview of Council's adopted customer service standards and our performance against these standards, as well as an overview on Council's drinking water services measured against the requirements of its approved drinking water quality management plan. The performance report assists the regulator to determine whether the approved drinking water quality management plan and any approval conditions have been complied with, and provides a mechanism for providers to report publicly on their performance in managing drinking water quality. There's two recommendations. The first, that Council notes that the Cassowary Coast Regional Council Water and Sewage Services Performance Report for the 2020-21, and also note that this report has been forwarded to the regulator, as discussed above, and has been published on Council's website. The second recommendation is that Council notes that the service level for water main breaks has not been achieved for this financial year, and requests the Chief Executive Officer considers this in preparation for the upcoming budget.
Thank you, Mr Page. I'll just make a comment about the second part of the recommendation. You've asked the CEO to consider preparation in the budget to look at the area where we've fallen short in terms of water breaks. Could I also request that you consider some extra funding in the budget to allow some multi-skilling? We've got some really good people in that section who'd like to multi-skill, and if you could give them an opportunity to do restricted licences, it allows a labourer to work their way up the career path. It's good for morale, it's good for our organisation in terms of broadening our skills in that water section, and I'm sure as a manager it'll help you deliver, because the last thing we want is to run short on plumbers and have to contract everything out. So I ask that you consider that in your budget request to the CEO.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We certainly will.
Thank you for that. Councillor Norwood.
Through the chair, Mr Page, I also noted a recommendation too that we have not achieved the level of service. So do we have a plan in place which will then enable the required level of service to be achieved?
Yeah, we have with all our key performance indicators and level of service information we have gathered over the past, we look at a number of those areas which we have not met or achieved our required level of service, and with that, obviously we look at whether it's a operational or a capital investment is required.
Yeah.
So we are increasing our capital works and looking at those levels of service, obviously for main breaks and so forth. We undertake a lot of internal reviews on those areas, and those areas where we do see a level of service decreasing, they go in to be put up for our next capital works in the next financial year.
No worries. And I also noted that Tully has got the most of the main breakages, and have we allowed for, or are we going to allow for money in the budget to suffice fixing the largest number of main breakages within the region, which are in Tully?
Yes, we've already undertaken a lot of forward design works for the Tully region for water main replacement. So that forward design work will lead into next year's capital works for actually our install of new pipework in that area. And we've done a number of preemptive works already, and so we are looking at increasing the rollout of our capital works in the Tully scheme to look at these areas of a number of breaks. Because you are correct in the fact that Tully has had the largest number of breaks in this reporting period, so we are looking at ways to start to diminish those breaks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Millwood. Councillor Pervin.
Morning, Mr. Page. Just a quick one. In relation to the water main renewals, how are we tracking for this financial year's budget in relation to the water main renewals we had included in the budget? Are we on track or are we running behind?
I'd say we're just a little bit behind at the moment, sort of thing. And obviously, it's we've had a number of factors that have impacted on that sort of thing. The biggest one's been COVID and just getting that workforce out into the Cap 2 area. We've had trouble in recruiting some plumbers as well. So obviously that's been raised earlier in relation to the upskilling. So so to answer your question, we are a little bit behind, but we are putting more focus into that area over the preceding months to pick that up again.
All right, thanks, Mr. Page.
Thank you, Councillor Pervin. Any further questions for the officer? If not, would somebody move the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Pervin, seconded by Councillor McLeod. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. We move on to item 5.2, page 65, Asset Rationalisation Process, Lease Report, Tully Support Centre, and Mr McBride will present this report.
Morning, councillors. Morning, CEO.
Morning.
Morning, Mr. McBride.
Presenting two reports today, which are both lease disposals to community groups within the Cassowary Coast. The first one refers to the Tully Support Centre. By way of background, well, the local government regulations allow for a disposal to a community organisation without going to public tender or auction, provided there is a prior council resolution. So these reports both seek to get a resolution from council prior to entering into a lease. By way of background, the site refers to 54 Bryant Street in Tully, which is the whole of the lot. The organisation is the Tully Support Centre. The Tully Support Centre have been occupying the existing site for nearly 30 years and have been maintaining all the improvements on the land associated with that lease. They're fully funded and supported by state and federal government, and their services include Cassowary Coast Domestic and Family Violence Services, emergency relief, family support, adult and child counselling, case management and court support, safety planning and risk assessments, Centrelink agents, and information and advice referrals. The current lease is due to expire on the 31st of December 2024, but the Tully Support Centre require a new lease to aid their ongoing applications for grant funding through the state and federal government with a longer residual term. The proposed terms of the lease, as negotiated by officers, includes a 30-year lease expiring on the 31st of October 2051, a peppercorn lease arrangement, outgoings, rates and charges paid by the lessee. The permitted use is Centre for Community Facilities, and all improvements on site are owned and the responsibility of the lessee. The recommendation within the report, there's three parts to this, and the first is apply the exception contained in section 236B2 of the Local Government Regulation 2012 to grant a lease to Tully Support Centre Inc. in line with the following key terms, which were discussed in the report. Authorise the Chief Executive Officer to execute the lease on behalf of Council as the leaseor, and authorise the Chief Executive Officer to ensure ongoing compliance with all terms and conditions of the lease.
Thank you, Mr McBride. Councillor Millwood.
Be sick of me by the end of the day. Good morning, Mr McBride. This is more just the support for the actual recommendation. The Tully Support Centre has played a critical role in this community in providing ongoing support to families and has done so for many years. So to see this lease extension is a great demonstration of Council's commitment to recognise and support the partnership for the greater of the community benefit. So I'd like to move the recommendation be accepted.
Moved by Councillor Millwood, seconded by Councillor Pervin. I'd just like to go to the background and how this is recommendations linked to our corporate plan. It comes under the heading of one of the pillars, community, our people, what we want to see by 2025, and the critical words are council working in partnership with the community to enhance and promote pride in and livability of the region. There's no doubt Tully Support Centre is a star in this area and an integral part of our social fabric. So I have no hesitation in supporting the report either. We have a move and a seconder. Any further comments, councillors? All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. We move on to item 5.3, page 68, asset rationalisation process, lease report, Tully Bowhunters Club. Mr McBride.
Thank you, Mayor. As per the previous report, the purpose of this paper is to seek Council's resolution prior to entering into a lease with the Tully Bowhunters. By way of background, the premises that the Bowhunters occupy is Tully Gorge Road in Tully. The Tully Bowhunters Club have been established since 1977 and have occupied this site since 2004. The club caters for bowhunters and archers generally. It allows schools and other clubs to use the site and facilities at no cost. The club has reclaimed the old quarry and carried out extensive rehabilitation and landscaping of the site and constructed their own facilities, and all the improvements on the land are owned by the leasee. The club is proved to be entirely self-sufficient with its own power supply and amenities, and subsequently, in line with Council's adopted principles, we're seeking to allow the Tully Bowhunters to enter into a new lease in line with the following terms and conditions. The site, as discussed, is Tully Gorge Road, Tully. The term of the agreement is 10 years from the 1st of the 12th, 2021 to the 30th of the 11th, 2031, under a peppercorn arrangement, which is $1 per annum. Outgoings, rates and charges are the responsibility of the leasee, and all improvements on the land are under the ownership of the leasee as well. And the permitted use is Bowhunters and Archery Club and ancillary purposes. We have, just in line with this process, officers have gone through and looked at the governance, insurance, financial reports of the user group, and they've certainly demonstrated to officers that they're deserving of a new 10-year lease, and we're happy to support that and put that recommendation forward to Council.
Thank you, Mr McBride. Councillor Barnes.
Good. Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to support this lease. I know that this committee, a very hard-working committee, has been waiting for this lease for a very long time, as they have appetite not only for the state championships but also for the national championships. I think that could be coming up within a couple of years, so this is very crucial. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barnes. Councillor Millwood.
Yes, through the chair. I also have the support for this. The long-standing Bowhunters Club is another great community-minded group with self-initiative and a great track record. They have a beautiful facility out there. I know people have been out there and actually got married and had all sorts of functions out there that they've hired the facility for. So, yeah, no, I fully support it, and I would like to move that we go with the recommendation.
Moved by Councillor Millwood. Oh, sorry, you want to speak, Councillor Baines? Yep.
Yes, if I may. Thank you, Mr Chair. I really love the idea of not a shotgun wedding, but a crossbow wedding. That's really quite interesting. Just one question, Peter. The last lease was 30 years. This lease is significantly shorter, being a 10-year lease. Do they have an option to... is there an options phase at the end of this, or because sometimes trying to, especially if they're not just going for government money, if they're trying to borrow money, 10 years can be quite a short tenure that they may not be able to qualify. So
10 years would normally be sufficient for grants. That was just the discussions with the leasee, I believe, and I've been working with my colleague there as well, but that was part of the discussion where at the end of that 10-year period, they're welcome to apply for a new lease, or during the term, if they're seeking a funding agreement which requires a longer term of tenure, Council can look at that in due course.
Okay, sorry, and through you as a second part, we can still look at that under Section 236 anyway, as the...
At any time, Council can surrender and enter into a new lease with the support of Council. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baines. We have a mover. A second, please. seconded by Councillor Baines. I'd like to go to the corporate plan again and just highlight why we're going to support this recommendation. Again, council working in partnership with the community to enhance and promote pride and livability in the region. And what we want to see by 2025, regional infrastructure that delivers levels of service supported by the community and is financially sustainable. And this recommendation ticks all those boxes. So any further comments, councillors? All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Move on to item 5.4, page 70, CCRC Capital Report. And Mr Slattery was going to present, and he's just walked in. Welcome, Mr Slattery. I believe this is your first report to council, and just want to formally welcome you on board and hope you enjoy the journey with the rest of us. Thanks, mate. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. CEO, councillors. Capital report for 21. Per the executive summary, the capital works program for the 21-22 financial year has been adopted, and the status of individual projects is reported on monthly. By way of background, council continues to advance with the delivery of the capital works projects commenced in prior years, as well as delivery of new projects across 21-22. This comprises of 261 projects with a total budget spend of 49.7 million. As at the 6th of January, council has expended 27 million of the program capital works, or 54% of the planned program. Specific to December, despite a few wet days, the whole of council closed down. We saw an increased effort in both the delivery of the program, well above the forecast for the month. Per the capital status report, there are two programs on watch for overspends, namely town centres and regional tourism development. Within the town centres, the Mission Beach car park is running north of budget due to scope variations, as is the wayfinding signage project within the regional tourism development program. Just want to take the opportunity to highlight a few projects that have been completed since the last report. Among others, Warramie Road ceiling, McQuillan Road floodway, a decent section of the Ranch Road, Cardia Road deco path, and Donkin Lane drainage renewal. Just a little on risk management. We've obviously got the weather risks at the moment, can have the obvious impacts on delivery of these projects. And I guess COVID is certainly starting to impact us on our day-to-day runnings and within our capital program as well. So I'd like to recommend that the council receive the report and acknowledge the status of the capital works projects managed by it.
Thank you,
Happy to
Mr
take
Slattery.
questions.
Question, Councillor Millwood.
Through the chair, good morning, Mr Slattery. On page 3 of the report, I noticed that we mentioned Murray Street project. Can you please elaborate on the works plan for Murray Street and when the project may start and how long it may take?
Okay, there's two projects in Murray Street, through the chair, apologies. One is for a culvert renewal, culvert 10. That's a little way down Murray Street, I think adjacent to Bynum Street, and there's also the one between Curtis and Richardson Street, if you can clarify.
That's the one.
Okay, so that one there is still in the design phase at the moment. In terms of timing, it's quite a difficult answer to provide right now because it's still in design phase, of course, and we need to place orders for culverts, and until we know what the design looks like, we aren't able to do that. And currently there are long lead times for those culverts. So it is, I guess, a dry season job. I'd like to say that we'd start that in this financial year, towards the end of the wet season, early in the dry season, perhaps May, June, but really does depend on the delivery of those culverts once we place an order for those.
Do we need more funding for this project, or is it fully funded at the minute?
I'd take that on notice if I could. Yeah, can't answer that one.
Okay. And the other one was on page 5, the Tully RV parking. I was just wondering when we would see the line marking and the RV signage erected.
Yeah, okay. So with the line marking, there's quite a few projects open at the moment that require line marking. So what we want to do there is we don't do that internally. We always contract line marking out. So we want to package up a few of those projects and deliver those through a contractor, an external contractor. One of those projects is the Mission Beach car park. It's probably about a month away. So when that's completed, we'll start there. And then other line marking jobs like the RV park, we've got South Mission boat ramp, and a few projects in Cardwell as well. And we'll attack those all at the same time.
Thank you, Councillor Millwood. Councillor Chewy.
Good morning. Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor. Morning, Mr Slattery. Just the Mission Beach car park is obviously close to completion. There has been a lot of commentary to me and in social media about trees. Could we have some clarification on where trees? I believe we are agreeing to trees being put in. So if we could have some idea about where, when, and what type of tree, if that's at all possible. Thank you. There's obviously concern. I've actually parked in a car park at Mission Beach and had a tree fall on my windscreen, so that's just something obviously that needs to be considered. We like shade, but we need to be practical about the outcome as well. Thank you.
Okay, I'll take part of that on notice. Look, there is certainly a plan to put foliage and potentially shrubbery in that car park. I can't tell you the specific plants and the look of those, but there's certainly a planning in place for that, and that'll happen soon after the completion of that car park. We'll start planning stuff there, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Chewy. Councillor Barnes.
Good, thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Slattery, I heard you say earlier about design. Being the head of your department, your section, are you finding that we've hit a bottleneck with a lot of our design projects? Is that what's holding some projects up? Or is it supply, or is it staff?
No, certainly issues with staffing with COVID. We've had some impacts in the delivery of capital projects and our day-to-day maintenance program as well with staffing issues. I wouldn't say that design specifically is holding up the delivery of those projects, no.
Through the chair, I think council's focus to actually allocate additional funding to design this year is allowing us to really start to try and get ahead. But I think it is probably a fair comment that historically, design, based on the funding and the resources to deliver, has worked hard to keep up with our delivery teams. But the additional funding this year and some recent recruitment in that space is certainly starting to assist.
Good, thank you. Well said.
Any further, Councillor Barnes? That's it? Okay.
No.
Councillor Baines.
Thank you, Mr Chair, and I just wanted to run into a little bit more on the question from Councillor Chewy and to Brendan about vegetation. We have two wonderful nurseries that are council run. They're very experienced in what endemic species need to be grown and what are specific to certain areas. So I can assure you both that our team and the volunteers at our nurseries will make sure that the appropriate vegetation goes in place, and hopefully you won't end up with a tree branch on yours. No, that's okay. We've got some really, really experienced crew in our nurseries, and they know exactly what sort of trees to put in there. So,
yeah, thank you, Councillor Baines. Look, I'd like to supplement Councillor Chewy's request for some greenery around the car park. The car park's actually stage one of the Mission Beach Master Plan. It is the legacy project of this council. We've spoken to Bob Catter, and he also is requesting some upgrade in terms of the vegetation at that site. And we did a walkthrough with Anthony Albanese, Leader of the Opposition, recently. Made it very clear that this is our number one project. And I think the car park can be the flagship to attract that state and federal funding. Shane Knuth is also very supportive. So let's finish the car park off the way the community wants it. And also federal member, Mr Catter, who's made a personal request to the CEO to see this happen. Are there any further comments or questions? Somebody move the recommendation, please. Moved by Councillor Chewy, seconded by Councillor Barnes. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr Slattery. We move on to Planning Services, item 6.1, page 83, delegation report, and Mr Horton will present this report.
Thanks, Council. Morning.
Morning.
Council, item 6.1, delegation report and current applications. As you're fully aware, we spoke last council meeting that we'd be moving to make sure that we provide the documentation in detail to you, but we'll do that through another manner of a dashboard and live data for yourselves to be able to see that at all times. the public's able to see it at all times. We have everything on the My Council website up there. People can see that as we do things from day to day in the office, and what decisions we make around those applications. So that is all there, and we welcome the public to jump on board as well. Overall, Council, for planning, we had 26 approvals for the month of December, so this is finishing December off. We had 24 under delegation and 2 at Council. Overall, we're up for the 6-month period, for our financial period, we're up 12 from last year, with 123 approvals there, Council so far, which is nice to see. Overall, the dwelling approvals for the year were 150, well above any of the past 5-year periods. I think the closest we had was 94 approvals in a year, so it's a fair account of the movement and activity that we've got in our region. Overall approvals, we had 568, well above any of the past years as well, which is nice to see. Overall, Council, for the December month, it drops away usually in December and January because people have the Christmas break and go on leave, but overall we had 35 approvals for $4.7 million worth of estimated works for the month of December. Overall for the year, Council, total figures for all approvals was 67.1 million into our region, and with housing was 43.2 million in estimated costs for the year. So it's a substantial amount of money that's going into our area. And as you can see, there's a number of subdivisions to come online and hopefully further applications into Council to deal with that. Overall, Council, the other one that I just wanted to provide was the records. As we know, with our property searches, building searches, rate searches and so forth, they're well above any other time. So we finished with 546 for the year. So that is a large, substantial amount. We know we went through those periods from years before where we had people come in and buy a lot of the land in Mission Beach. So it gives us great confidence to show that people are investing in our area and coming to the area and, sourcing existing dwellings and hopefully, add to those with upkeep and maintenance. And, we move forward as an area, which is nice to see. Any questions? Happy to answer.
Any questions for the officer? Councillor Chewy.
Thank you, Mr. Horton, through the chair. Great statistics, and we know that we're booming. Just a question: as far as livable sheds go, is there a time frame and for people to be in a shed before they have to build their house?
Through the chair, the way a livable shed works, it is a Class 10A approval, which is usually a non-residential type of occupation. For that shed, we do the temporary home permit, usually for a 12-month period, to allow those people to occupy that, usually with a shower and toilet, and we give the dwelling approval. They start with that, but they have to have a dwelling approval in place. If they don't have that, they're unlawfully occupying that building at the time. So everyone sort of talks about a livable shed. It's either a dwelling or a shed. There's no livable component. It's one or the other.
Thank you. It's just we know a lot of people are living in sheds on their new property in anticipation of building their house, and then the shed will become a shed and not a dwelling. So I just needed some clarification on that. Thank you.
Councillor Millwood.
Through the chair. So just on the My Council bit, is there a step-to-step guide that we can put out for the community to be able to follow, to be able to have a look at all those approvals that we do?
Through the chair, we can definitely look at that, Councillor. Yeah, it's pretty simple format, but we can provide as much as we can. We try to in every inquiry that we have or any search that we send out, and we put that documentation at the bottom of our thing where the location is. We put the link in the email to the customer as well, so they can go directly there. So definitely we can look at fact sheets and those types of things to improve our items on our website.
Any further questions for Mr. Horton? Just a general comment, Mr Horton, aside from your report. The Cairns Post are chasing feedback from our planners in relation to why we support a review of the 2009-2031 regional plan. We all know about the housing crisis. We know about zoning restrictions. So there's some really good reason. But fellow councillors, if the Cairns Post contacts you, please don't respond, because we do need our officers to put some thought into this. All the mayors in North Queensland are calling for a review of the regional plan. It's restricting every area, and a lot of the problems is around zoning. So there will be an article very shortly by the Cairns Post, but Mr Horton and Mr Jones are compiling that response. So just want to keep everybody in the loop on that. Mr Horton, can you make some summary of why the planners would like to see a review of the regional plan?
Through the chair, the regional plan, is a document that was produced in 2008, 2009. At that time, we went through the draft process and we got it finalised in 2009. We had a lot of involvement with that at the time. It's a very environmental plan, and the aspects around control with zonings and urban footprints and those types of things were really in place, and that was because of the explosion in South East Queensland at the time, moving around 06, 07, and when that plan came out. Since then, those plans have been redone, and as you would know, fully aware, that North Queensland one has just been, was released as well. They're totally different plans. They look at different components and economic development and drive around those areas, and they explain it a lot better. And plus, the regional plans of today have got a lot further commitments in them, and put those commitments in place around infrastructure, transport. And look, we really need to review the components of the regional plan. It's a very lower order and very prescriptive type of plan at the moment, which then feeds into our planning scheme. We need to be at a higher level, talking more strategically about the whole region and what the region expects to see moving forward, and the commitments from the state on what they will deliver, and how we can work in with those guys to deliver what we need to, especially around our port, our rail networks, our transport networks up to Palmerston, our linkages, and how we link to Tablelands, how we, we're link with Cairns, with industrial, those types of things, and how that flows through our region. So we really need to review and get that to a higher level, and more, I suppose, more around how do we drive this area with the change, especially now we got COVID and how we work. It's a different type of component, and that's what we got to look in the planning scheme. But we got to have the changes to the regional plan to be able to make those changes in our planning scheme at the same time.
Thanks for that very comprehensive response, mate. Any further questions for the officer? Councillor Baines.
Thank you, Mr Chair. And probably just a comment. Dan, and I think I'm not speaking for you, Mr Horton, but I suppose you probably see nowadays that a lot of the development applications that are coming forward in this day and age are very environmentally sustainable. They're very conscious of what's going on. Organically, the industry's growing into, we need to be part of the environment. And I can't remember that term that was used at the conference, Mr Graffin, about negative, or I can't remember at the moment, but the real push in the world is to development can go on and be part of the environment, and we're in the heart of the wet tropics and the birthplace of the Great Barrier Reef, and that should not exclude responsible, sustainable development from our area. And this review of the regional plan will allow us to step into those spaces, make sure all those protections are in place.
Thank you, Councillor Baines. Any further questions for the officer? Somebody move the report, please. Moved by Councillor Purban, seconded by Councillor Millwood. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr Horton. We move on to item 6.2, page 97, material change of use for showroom expansion of land at Gundy Bend, and Mr Jones will present. Welcome, Mr Jones.
Good morning, everybody. Council has received an application for material change of use. The application was prepared by Urban Sync on behalf of JEC Super for the expansion of showroom activities on the site. The proposed development involves a minor expansion to the existing John Cole Toyota dealership to facilitate a new dealership and showroom, as well as an expansion to the existing back-of-house facilities. The application is code accessible and therefore public notification was not required. The application triggered referral to the state government due to the proximity to the Bruce Highway. The application is generally consistent with the provisions of the planning scheme and is recommended for approval subject to reasonable and relevant conditions. Happy to answer any questions, Council.
Thank you, Mr Jones. Any questions for the officer? Moved by Councillor Millwood, seconded by Councillor Pervin. You want to speak to it, Councillor Pervin? No, okay, we have a move and a second. Any further comments or questions, councillors? I just want to say in support, this business owner has just done an expansion up in Atherton, a showroom, and it's state of the art. These are good corporate citizens and they deserve our support. Any further comment?
Oh, another comment, Mr Mayor. I mean, this is just a great example of the confidence that's being shown in our region at the moment. Planning department, look, all the departments within Cassowary Coast region, everyone's starting to understand we're open for business. We can do these things properly. We're easy to work with. And I encourage anyone and everyone who wants to come up here and do something sustainably, come and talk to us, and we're here.
If there's no, Councillor Millwood.
Yeah, no, just a comment as well. You know, this is another economic driver in our community, and I think it's a great application. And like you just said, the one at Up the Tablelands that they did was number one. So I fully support it.
Okay, we have a move and a second. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr Jones. Don't go away. Item 6.3, page 171, material change of use for a food and drink outlet. Back to you, Mr Jones.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Council is in receipt of an application for mature change of use prepared by Vision Surveys on behalf of NM and AA Foley Superannuation Fund for a food and drink outlet on the site. Proposed development seeks a development permit to allow the establishment of a food and drink outlet, being a food and coffee van. The food and drink outlet will consist of a single van located towards the Bruce Highway frontage of the site. The van will provide for food and drink for the travelling public. The van will not be a permanent structure and will operate with 2 employees between Thursday and Sunday from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. The van currently operates from the Diggers Creek Rest area on the outskirts of Ellerish. The application is impact accessible and therefore public notification was required. 0 properly made submissions were received by Council. The application triggered referral to the state government due to the proximity to the Bruce Highway. The application is generally consistent with the provisions of the planning scheme and is recommended for approval subject to reasonable and relevant conditions. Happy to answer any questions, Council.
Councillor, thank you, Mr Jones. Councillor Chewy.
Thank you, through the chair. Just, Mr Jones, regarding toilet facilities on site, are there some nearby? And I'm assuming that we have no management over them or cleaning. And have we looked at them to see that they are of a decent standard for the public? Thank you.
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor Chewy. We have conditioned that the public toilets that are available on the site are available for the public using that particular facility. They are owned by the owners of that site, so there's no maintenance responsibility on council, and they were recently upgraded.
Any further questions or comments for the officer? If not, somebody move the recommendation, please. Moved by Councillor Millwood, seconded by Councillor Baines. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr Jones. We move to item 6.4, page 233, material change of use for multiple dwellings in Emily Street, Innisfail. Mr Jones.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Council is in receipt of an application for a material change of use prepared by Gilbert Planning on behalf of Ralph's Ranch for multiple dwellings being 9 units on the site. The site currently has a dwelling house which is proposed to be removed from the site and repurposed on another site. The proposed development involves construction of a 3-storey apartment building with a maximum height of 11.5 metres, comprising of 7 one-bedroom units and 2 two-bedroom units. The application was impact accessible and therefore public notification was required. 1 properly made submission was received by Council during the notification period. The application did not trigger referral to the state government, however Council sought advice from Queensland Health in regards to the potential impact of the height of the development and construction activities on the operation of the Innisfail Hospital helipad. The application is generally consistent with the provisions of the planning scheme and is recommended for approval subject to reasonable and relevant conditions. Happy to answer any questions, Council.
Thank you, Mr Jones. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of comments about this wonderful development application. Over to you, Chair of Planning, and Councillor Pervin.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Chair. First of all, I'd like to move this motion, Mr Mayor, if I could. But also I'd just like to speak on it. This is something that we've currently got a housing shortage in the Innisfail area. We've been approached by the the education department, the hospital in relation to a shortage of housing. This is just one way of us, within our prioritised infrastructure areas, of getting some more multiple unit dwellings on these blocks build into within our heights that we've currently got in our current town plan. Mr. Jones, it's currently, what's this on, 2 stories, is it?
Through the chair, Councillor Pervin, because it's over 9.5 metres. That's our current height in the planning scheme for that particular area. So 11.5 will be 2 metres above. The reason for this is because the area does flood. So the developer's chosen to put the car parks on the bottom to raise the minimum floor level required under the planning scheme for flooding.
Yeah, this is good utilisation of those areas. Like, I mean, look, you can't get much closer to the CBD of Innisfail for having look, call it a little development, big development, but it is something that I'd love to see more of within our CBD area. The people doing this, I take my hats off to them, and I'm grateful that they've actually decided to invest in our area and do something like this. It's something that we need. And Mr. Mayor, yeah, if I could move the motion for this one.
It's noted. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Chewy. Any further comments or questions? Councillor McLeod.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that this is a positive step for our region due to the housing crisis in this area and all the way across Queensland. And yeah, I'm looking forward to this one being built.
Thank you, Councillor McLeod. Any further comments? Just on the issue that Councillor Pervin raised, no matter whether you're talking to the police, the health department, school teachers, they're all saying they need more accommodation for professionals. We all hear about the affordable housing cry. There's people struggling out there, renters in particular, who are missing out because their homes have been sold from under them. But in terms of professionals, we can't retain them here because we haven't got enough accommodation. So this is a great step forward in addressing that long-running issue. Any further comments or questions? We have a mover and a seconder. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Jones. We now move on to item 6.5, page 321, material change of use for a roadside stall. Mr. Jones again. It's not Jonas Griffin Fedora.
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll step into this one. Council received an application for material change of use prepared by Mr. Dylan DeFavry on the site. The proposed development involves a material change of use to allow the owner of the residential property to sell fruits using a roadside stall located within the property. There will be an entry and exit point to Palmerston Highway, being a state-controlled road, and 2 parking spaces will be provided on the lot to complement the use. The application is impact assessable and therefore public notification was required. 2 properly made submissions were received by Council. The application triggered referral to the state government due to the proximity to the Bruce Highway. The application is generally consistent with the provisions of the planning scheme and is recommended for approval, subject to reasonable and relevant conditions. Happy to answer any questions, Council.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Any questions for the officer? If there's no questions, somebody move the recommendation. Councillor Chewy, seconded by Councillor Barnes. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. That brings us up to item 7, general business. Councillor Millwood.
Through the chair, yeah. I've been informed recently that the Atherton Road project has now been removed from our work schedule, so I was just wondering if anybody could shine the light on where this funding would be diverted to.
Through the chair, I think Mr. Slattery will be able to provide a response.
Thanks, through the chair. The Atherton Road project was one project that sat inside a submission for a Works for Queensland package, submission 3. As we know, that project's not going ahead. In terms of the funding, what we're looking to do there is we've made an application to the department to try and get those funds redispersed amongst other projects within that same submission. So specifically, I don't know which ones they are right now, but basically, and we haven't had a response from the department, but that's what we're looking to do.
I'd like to make a request that we that maybe the funding could be sought to be put into the revitalisation of Tully project. Other than that, we had scrap metal balers that were supposed to come before Christmas. It's been brought to my attention again that the Bells Creek facility has got mounds and mounds of white goods and scrap metals at the location. I just wondered if there's been any further advances, because we actually pay those people to come twice a year to get rid of all the scrap metal and stuff. They haven't come at all in the past 12 months. So I'm just wondering if this has been done, and if not, I'll chase it up with FNQ Rock.
Over to you, Mr Sadler.
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor Melwood, for your question. In relation to Bells Creek, I'm understanding that the supervisor was there on Tuesday. I don't have an update since that time, so I will seek that update. There was issues with the baler from the contract in relation to our scrap metal piles. They were to be on site at the beginning of this week, and I'll get an update for you directly and get that outcome sorted for you.
Thank you, Mr Sadler.
One more query was about, I've had several phone calls over the past week about the lack of slashing in the region. Do we have any line of sight to what's happening in that space?
Mr Sadler.
Sure, I'll take that one too. Thank you, Councillor. Through the chair, Councillor Millwood. We do have, as highlighted earlier on today, through some of the other reports, we do have about a 25% reduction in our staff at the moment in relation to whether that's annual leave, sick leave or COVID leave. So we do have a backlog, and I did update council on that at the end of last week. We do have, in relation to vegetation maintenance and grass cutting, we do have a backlog there that we are, I suppose, keeping an eye on. We are, I suppose, have a number of impacts on that. We do have some vacancies in that space as well. Machinery is ready to go. We will look at any external support on that if it continues.
Yes, I was just going to suggest, I know we don't want to look to outside contractors, but maybe for the short term it might be worth getting some on board to get everything back on top. Anyway.
Through the chair, I think there's a focus on level of service. Obviously, the reduced level of service probably from a aesthetic slashing point of view, but those resources are being focused onto those that are a safety concern. And I guess if there are members of the community that have specific areas where they feel that that reduction in level of service due to the matters that Mr Sadler have highlighted are causing a safety concern, would encourage them please to contact council, and those resources can again continue to be focused on those safety areas. But do apologise, we are impacted like most other organisations with what we're experiencing at the moment, and it has meant that from an aesthetic point of view that we're not meeting that level of service that the public may be used to in some areas, but safety is still a focus.
Councillor Barnes.
Good. Good, thank you, Mr Mayor. Just further on from the scrap metal, Mr Sadler, we pay those contractors to come, but we must get revenue from the scrap because scrap is currently at an all-time high.
Yes, through the chair, that is correct. As part of the FNQ Rock contract that we are part of, we do get revenue from that work.
All right, I thought as much. And now a question maybe for Councillor Jeffrey or Adam yourself is the pig eradication. With the last 3 or 4 weeks, we've seen a major influx of pigs in our shire, especially in the farming area.
Yeah, I can step to that first, Mr Sadler, if you're okay, through you, Mr Chair. There's a feral pig meeting on next week, next Tuesday, 3rd of Feb, which is the last one for the state-run program. We do have presentation and the attendance of the national coordinator for the National Pig Program attending. Look, there was a hiatus over the Christmas break period on baiting, but the baiting program is up and running as of the 19th. There's a lot of growers and in cane and bananas that are being part of it. We would like, as a program, that as many of them coming forward and talking to us, because if we can set up baiting clusters, it makes it much easier upon all of the landholders. If we can get a cluster of landholders in an area where we can do these programs, it restricts the amount of notification that has to go around, because you're only negotiating with the boundary holders around the outside of the cluster. Council doesn't do that work directly, but we will assist in that sort of work. So the baiting program is up and running. It is still going again. Where we go in the future, I mean, the state-funded program was very successful. It ran for 3 years, which has been very well supported. I'm not speaking ill of any government. I love working with the state and the feds, but 3 years isn't long enough in a region like this to bed something like this in place. So I would encourage the state or the federal government to help us continue, because the model that we've designed within the Cassowary Coast region is something that can be exported around the entire country, and I think it needs to be. They need to give us a hand and keep us going along. So,
good on. Good. Thank you, thank you, Councillor Baines. And as far as the mowing contractors, I know that we have been using contractors for a good while, as our two main green slashes in the southern section did have turbo issues, and with COVID there was a long wait for parts, so we did employ contractors and we are currently still using them. But as Councillor Millwood stated, there is a big backlog, and the growing conditions recently has just made it an endless task. Maybe a question for the CEO. Now, we have a great facility in Clump Point. Now, I know we gave a 6-month waiting period, settling down period. Now, I think that 6 months is up at the end of January. Now, I know we have to put a lot of work into our local laws now to bed that down, so we can get income now from all the leases on all those swing moorings. Where are we standing there, Mr. CEO?
Through the chair, yeah, there has been a lot of work going to those local laws. So those local laws are currently with the department for review. So that review could take 4 to 6 weeks. Those local laws will then, following review, be updated with any comments of relevance from the department. They'll be brought to council as a draft, and that will be seeking council to endorse those local laws to go out for public comment. That public comment needs to be a minimum of 21 days, and then those local laws will come back to council to be considered for adoption. So it's in the process. There's some components at the moment that we've got legislative requirements that dictate the time frame, and others that resourcing within the department to do that review. But from our side, they're currently sitting with the department, and we'll seek to have those for council consideration to go to public comment as soon as possible.
All right, thank you. While I've got you, it was only this week that I mentioned about the big problem that some of our neighbouring councils are having with hip camps affecting their local caravan parks, and I'm just hoping as a council that we soon do a study on our RV parks, our caravan parks, and the list of applicants which we're getting in from people who wish to start these hip camps. Now, I know some councils rushed into it and now they're regretting with the decisions they made. So I hope that's not us. And the last question I think I've got is we had a tender out for the construction of the pump track in Cardwell, and I think that closed last week. But I know we're in hard times running this council. We've got 2 or 3 officers in isolation, and I know even yourself, so maybe you can't answer that?
I'll have to take that on notice unless Mr. Sadler, who's in the room, is able to provide an update on that. But we'll take that on notice and come back to you. But yes, thanks.
Councillor Dewey.
Thank you, through the chair. I have several bits and pieces. Just a question for Mr. Slattery. Is he still in the room? Thank you. I've had several people ask me regarding the playground equipment being returned to South Mission now that the path is completed, and the return of playground equipment of some degree to Wheatley Park. Wheatley Park's looking fantastic with the turf, but people are wanting it to go back to an area that they can take their children and families to. So could you give us an update on both of those things, please?
Sure, thank you for the question. Through the chair, I'll start with South Mission. So the park set will be reinstalled there next week. Okay, so yeah, we've just been impacted with manning, a few troops down. So yeah, we're back on that next week. Wheatley Park, yeah, it does look great. Obviously, we don't have a play set back in there at present. The one that was in there was close to end of life. When we removed that, it was damaged. It can't go back in. So what we've done is formed a working group with some officers from council and some external community groups. We haven't met yet, but the plan is to meet with those and kick some ideas around about what we might put back in there. And I guess flavour of the month or year, if you like, right now is Nature Play. So we're looking for options in that space that will sort of target that same age group that the previous equipment.
Thank you. And do we know, I suppose we don't know, if Netflix are coming back, so obviously we need to take that into consideration. Should they come back and use that space, then that we need to have something that can be taken in and out.
Absolutely, yep.
Okay, thank you, Mr Slattery. I don't know if this is Mr Jones, Mr Horton, CEO or the Mayor. I'm just wondering how we're going with the securing of funding for the master plan for Mission Beach. You spoke earlier of it with Mr Albanese coming. I know our team did a walkthrough recently. Perhaps Mr Jones or Mr Horton could provide some information on that with the landscapers, I believe, were there. Thank you, Mr Slattery.
Through the chair, the funding application at the current time is being prepared and finalised. It needs to be lodged by the 10th of February with the government. At the moment, we're seeking our letters as well, external letters to support that. We have a number of that from our previous application. We're slowly going through that, making sure that we've got everything correlated, everything ticked, and the appropriate attachments done. But yeah, we're looking well to put in for that funding and keep our fingers crossed, Council, that it comes to us. So,
and I believe we had to make some changes from our last design, so that's obviously been taken into consideration. Was that what the walkthrough was? I was unable to attend when Mr Albanese came, but is that what was considered in the walkthrough?
Through the chair, the walkthrough was mainly around detailed design and moving forward with a change in pavement and those types of subtle approach changes. You know, a removal maybe of a bit of a concrete that was in the original design, but it's around the drainage and how that all fits together, the levels, and what type of furniture and those types of things within that. Our concepts will be much the same as what we had. That'll go at the current time because of the short time frame, but we'll continue to work with the community, the public, and any changes there we'll come back and consult as well. We'll get appropriate communication plans and engagement plans around that, so we can talk to a number of people and the businesses and the community again as we move forward with this project.
Thank you, Mr Horton. Just a couple of other things. We all met yesterday at the Shire Hall for a great celebration of our nation. We welcome our new citizens and we congratulate all the nominees and winners of our Australia Day Awards. It was a greater number of people that did take the time to nominate an event or a person, which is fantastic. So I congratulate everybody involved. A shout out to our staff, Ms Hanson, Ms Agley and Ms Vitale, for fine-tuning everything. I think they did a great job, so well done to them. And finally, I would just like to acknowledge the passing of Sue Smith. I'm going to call her Miss Smith because she was my teacher at Tully High and she taught many people at Tully High. So a large member of the community will have fond memories of her at Tully High. But she was also a very passionate environmentalist and worked very hard in lots of different groups, just some of which was the Wildlife Preservation Society of Queensland, Friends of Ninny Rise, the National Mahogany Glider Recovery Team. They're just a few other things. So, yes, I would just like to acknowledge her passing and send our condolences on behalf of Council to her family and friends. Thank you.
Thanks you, Councillor Chewy. Councillor Millwood.
Through the chair, so this was probably back at you, Jeff, about the pig baiting meeting. Could you just clarify where and what time that meeting will be and who can actually attend?
There is a committee that has been set up and running for 3 years on this pig baiting partnership. Those committee members are already engaged and included. It won't be open to the public, I believe. I think Mr Sadler's coming up to try and add a bit more to that. This is a conclusionary piece of the first program, but I would suggest, and Mr Sadler will pull me up if I take this too far, but I know Council wants to re-engage with many more growers. I've got a meeting myself with a couple of growers tomorrow. I've been having meetings with growers all the way through, so I would suggest in the near future we might have a bit of a broader meeting with the local industry, because it's a very important piece of this, is industry's got to be involved and work with us. It's not the state government's job, it's not council's job, it's everybody's job, and we all need to be part of it.
Yeah, I get that. And just one more on that while we're at it and while we've got you there, Mr. Sadler, is can you please put something out in the media about the changes to the allocated baits and the requirements and the new restrictions that are involved now that is it Queensland Health that have put in place? Thank you.
So through the chair, on the first question, Councillor Millwood, and just to support Councillor Baines, there is an executive oversight group which has got industry leaders. So both cane, bananas, it's also got defence, QPWS, council, DAF, and a whole heap of others that come to that table. So it is not an open meeting for everybody. There are industry leaders there. So for those growers, particularly whether they're banana, cane or beef or cattle, go to the industry leaders that do attend that. And yes, as Councillor Baines said, that is a wrap-up of the project that was externally funded. However, in saying that, because there's been some great relationships built from there, and that this is a catchment-based issue, that it will continue to meet and work with industry in relation to where are the problems, because pigs don't know the difference between bananas, cane or cattle. They will go wherever they need to go or want to go. So we have to all come together to solve this issue. In relation to your second question, we have, for all those growers that do work with council, they have been notified of the changes at the beginning of this year and how baiting will continue at this stage. We are working with a number of the industry leaders on how we can do that better. Communication is definitely the key, and yes, there has been changes in relation to distribution of the 1080 poison through Queensland Health, and we are making sure that we are compliant in relation to that.
Councillor Baines.
Well, probably, and a little bit further, with the baiting program now, it's actually running under federal legislation. At face value, it seems a little onerous and a little over the top, but it's not. We've discussed it at FNQ Rock, NAMAC level. We've discussed it at local level. There is a lot of simple methods that are being developed that we can take to landholders to make sure that it's not onerous and too hard for people to do. And there is an education piece being put together that'll be distributed through FNQ Rock, through the local NAMAC, and we'll make sure that it's brought up in any of these pig meetings. Again, we've got to make it easy for people, everyone to get involved. And as I said, if we all get involved in this and continue working together, we'll keep going forward with the amazing results we've had over 3 years. And if you're talking to any of your state and federal politicians, please encourage them to support us in getting this model refunded and building a model that we can export across Queensland in its entirety and the whole nation.
Thank you, Councillor Baines. Any further general business? Councillor Pervin.
Yeah, just a couple of questions probably directed to Mr. Sadler. Mr. Sadler, I think either the previous meeting or the meeting the meeting before, I asked about, and it was taken on notice, operating hours of the Stodders Hill Waste Transfer Station. How are we going with that? Have you got some information back to us on that yet? On how we can extend that operating hour of an afternoon?
Sorry, Councillor, I don't have the answer to that right now, sorry, and I'll follow that up with the staff later on today. I do have a number of those staff still on leave at this stage, so I will follow that up after this meeting for you.
Yeah, if you could, I'd appreciate that, because I've still got some members of the public and in particular business members of the public ask me about that. It's really ripping into their business and they find it very difficult. So if we could, get back to us as a council on a whole. Also, I just want to ask, as you first come into Innisfail from the south past the old high school where the set of stoplights are there, we've got along that whole entryway to our town there, it's not clean. I know it's main roads, but who maintains that? Is that the council or main roads? if you could let me know on that one, I'd appreciate that, because it needs a big clean up, and it is the very first thing when you come into town, especially in relation to the curb and channel there. It's all ripped up. The grass is long. I just would love to see a clean up. If we're not maintaining it, could we please get Main Roads to pull their finger out and give it a bit of a clean for us?
Well, yeah, through the chair, I'll follow that up for you, councillor.
Any further general business? Just want to make two comments. One is about the Port Inchbrook dredging issue that was raised earlier. Totally operational. We know it's sensitive negotiations, but from a political point of view, 7 councillors are nervous about the federal election being called and caretaker mode coming into vogue, and that could restrict the flow of that funding. So we're pretty nervous about our staff getting an agreement on that dredging before the federal election's called because of caretaker mode. Just put that on note. Supplement what Councillor Chewy said about the wonderful event yesterday. If you add up the hundreds of years of volunteer work that those nominees put in, it's unbelievable. And given that Irene Braddock was awarded 2022 Citizen of the Year, I thought it appropriate to go to Lions International and just read what they say describes a volunteer. It's not for money, it's not for fame, it's not for any personal gain. It's just for love of fellow man. It's just to send a helping hand. It's just to give a tilth of self. That's something you can't buy with wealth. It's not medals won with pride. It's that feeling deep inside. It's that reward down in your heart. It's that feeling that you've been a part of helping others far and near. That's what makes a volunteer. I thought that was very well written, and in terms of Irene Braddock, our Citizen of the Year, that describes her perfectly. If there's no further general business, we're now going to close the meeting to the public, and the reasons for closing item 8.1, page 359, request for legal assistance by the Chief Executive Officer, and that's a report from myself. And item 8.2, page 394, legal matters update, and that's a report from Andrew Graffin, our CEO. Would somebody move that we close the meeting? It's moved by Councillor Barnes, seconded by Councillor Baines. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Councillors, would somebody move that we go back into public, please? Moved by Councillor Pervin, seconded by Councillor Chewy. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 8.1 is a request for legal assistance by the Chief Executive Officer, a report that will be brought by myself, and Mr Graffin will leave the room at this point.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councillors, as a matter of background on this item, on the 8th of December 2021, Council was served with an application for a statutory order of review which seeks to, 1, review the decision and conduct of Council's CEO, Andrew Graffin, to authorise a costs agreement with Connolly Southern Solicitors for legal presentation of Council, James Gott, John Comassis, Ricky Taylor and Tracy Taylor, and for his conduct in compiling and presenting to Council the Legal Matters Update Report and recommendations, and 2, review the decision and conduct of Council in the 25th November 2021 meeting approving item 1 and 2 by resolution number LG 1159, specifically item 1, note the confidential report, Legal Matters Update, and item 2, opposing the appeal proceedings and request the Chief Executive Officer to action a security of costs application. In this matter, Council CEO Andrew Graffin is named as the first respondent and Council the second respondent. Subsequent to being served with this matter and in accordance with Council's policy, Andrew Graffin submitted an application for provision of legal representation costs on December 2021 to myself as Mayor. My role as Mayor in this process is to, 1, receive the application from the CEO, 2, assess the application against the assessment criteria outlined in provision of legal assistance for employees and Council Law's policy, and 3, make a recommendation to Council for its consideration. I have submitted my assessment of the application received from the CEO in my report and ultimately support approving the application made. It is worth noting that if Council decides to appoint the same legal advisor to represent both Mr Graffin as first respondent and Council as second respondent, there will be no additional cost incurred by Council in approving Mr Graffin's application. The recommendation I therefore provide to Council is 1, approve the payment of legal representation costs incurred by Andrew Graffin as first respondent in the application for statutory order of review matter 669/21, and 2, authorise the engagement of Connolly Southers to represent the Chief Executive Officer, Mr Andrew Graffin, in the application for statutory order of review matter 669/21. So moved. Somebody second the recommendation, please. Seconded by Councillor Baines. Any further comment, questions? All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Somebody grab Andrew, please. We move on to item 8.2, page 394, Legal Matters Update, and Mr Graffin will present this report.
Thank you, Mayor. Through the Chair, this report provides an update on legal matters afoot between Council and Bingle Bay couple Paul and Julianne Toogood, with particular focus on defamation matter D16917 and bankruptcy appeal matter QUD 36221. Council were last updated on these matters at LGM 9th December 2021. This report, further to previous updates, provides oversight to an application for a statutory order of review which was served on Council and myself as Chief Executive Officer by Mr Stephen Paul Toogood on the 8th of December 2021, and the report seeks to update Council on these matters. There is a recommendation there. The recommendation is that Council, 1, note the report, Legal Matters Update, 2, note the commencement of action against Cassowary Coast Regional Council and Council's Chief Executive Officer in matter 66921. 3. Resolve in accordance with Section 235A and B of the Local Government Regulations 2012 that it is satisfied that Connolly Southern solicitors are sole suppliers and or suppliers of specialised or confidential nature services for legal matters relating to Paul Toogood and or Julianne Toogood. 4. Authorise the engagement of Connolly Southers to represent counsel in matter 669/21. 5. Note that the defendants have refused James Scott's offer to discontinue defamation matter D16917. 6. Note, as a result of item 5, an application seeking an order from the court granting permission to discontinue defamation matter D16917 has been filed. 7. Note, in bankruptcy appeal matter QUD 362/2021, the appellants have not consented to provide security for costs. 8. Note, as a result of item 7, a security for costs application will be filed in bankruptcy appeal matter QUD 362/2021. And 9. Note that the respondents, other than counsel to bankruptcy appeal matter QUD 362/2021, have instructed Connolly Southers to file a submitting notice, if appropriate, at the earliest opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Graffin. Any questions for the officer? If not, would somebody move the recommendation, please? Moved by Councillor Baines, seconded by Councillor McLeod. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. That brings our meeting to a close at 11:20. Thank you.